Alright, so what we're going to do is we've got a bunch of
let's go through
a bunch
a
of
few
tasks,
So,
and we're going to look at
there's a
how
couple
we
of
can
small things
use
that I'll do different anchor points
immediately, and how we can animate the anchor point.
So I had a
and how we
question
can use other
before
things as the anchor
about
point.
Illustrator files.
So in the first
and
task,
when you put
task
them in,
0, 0, animating the
the
anchor point.
vector in Illustrator, but if you
It's
scale
pretty
them up, they get
self-explanatory. So I want you to
blurry.
try and animate the square.
So the
rolling
quick fix to that,
down
well, the only fix
the
to that
ramp.
is
so not sliding
you need
down,
to
but
tell
rolling
it
down
to
the ramp.
apply.
And to do so, you'll need to
treat
animate
it
the
as a
anchor
vector.
point. And then we'll look
And
at
so we
where
look
that
for
causes
this little
issues
starburst
and,
icon next to the layer,
and
we'll
where
click on that.
how we can
That's
improve
it.
that.
So
So I'll give you 5
that
minutes. A little bit
icon
more
just
to give
means
that a go.
continually rasterize. So rasterizing is turning.
Okay, so
into a pixel
as you will have
image.
noticed, it's
So what
pretty
After Effects
painful.
does is it takes the layer and it
So
turns it into a
I'll
pixel
do a
image
couple
to
of
work
things
with.
that you might have
And
tried.
this
So
icon just
the
simply
first
tells
thing
it to
is
do
that
that
the
every
first
frame
roll is
based on
pretty
whatever
easy because
size
I've already
it's
set
on
up
that
the anchor
frame.
point for you. So all you need to do is rotate it. So what that means is, if I keyframe rotation,
So
then move
the
along
first one that was up was
and
magnifying
change the rotation,
glass
then I've
distortion
done
effect.
Do you want to come up
roll and
The problem comes
that
when
video.
we go to the next roll.
Show us that.
So now, what page were you? I want to roll it around this corner, the other corner. So I need to move
And it
the
was on
anchor
number
point.
one?
So I'll hit the Y tool, and I'll move the anchor point, and I'll rotate
Not my
it.
true existing state.
And I
one?
think that works, because if I look at that, it's working. But if I go back and look at the first one, it's not working anymore. Because the anchor point is not on the first point at that point in time, it's always on the second point. So I need to animate the anchor point between each roll. So I'll undo that,
Right up the top.
and I'll undo that. So it's got the first roll. And then
Okay,
I'll open up the anchor point. So I'll
try and remember what
video, what
to
see
see
the anchor
your-
point.
what videos your effects come
Or
from.
I could
so
just
we can
open up or understand what it is.
transform
But
properties and
in this
see
case, I think it's
anchor point.
pretty self-explanatory. So
to see
let's have a
rotation
look
and
at
Shift A to see anchor
how to
point as
do
well.
that. So we want to create a magnifying
And
effect.
so
that
I know at the
runs over a
start,
whole scene. For this section, I want the
The
anchor
first thing
point to
I'm
be
gonna
where it
do,
is. So I'll put a keyframe there.
is just show something slightly different, just so that we can
Then
set up this
when
file
it gets
to see
to
it a bit
here,
better.
let's go to layer,
I
new,
want the anchor point
solid
to be over here,
and I'll just put that at the bottom.
so I'll hit Y,
and I'm going to
I'll
look
move the
for an
anchor
effect
point,
called
and
scribble.
I'll see that it's
just so we can get a bit of
given us a
texture in the
keyframe.
background. But what's happened
And-
is, well, let's just do this rotation first and see that it does work. But what's happened is
think it
we
needs
get
a mask,
similar
so
problem.
I'll draw a mask.
So here, the anchor point is there. But between here and here, the anchor point is moving. So it's shifting. But there's also something else happening.
I know it's white on white.
Notice that the square doesn't go back here. It stays where it
so
is.
Scribble just adds a bunch of kind of hatching
Because
or
even though
lines
the anchor point has
on your
moved
layer,
within
and
the
you can
object,
control it with a mask as well.
the position
So
of
notice
the
I can animate
object
this mask
isn't
and
changing.
It animates
The
where it
position
draws
is
that
still
scribble.
considered to
I can
be
even
here.
animate
So I forgot
the
to
start and
animate
end, so it draws
position
on
as well. If I'm animating
stroke
anchor
width,
point, I also need to
spacing
animate position.
somewhere.
So let's go back again. And when I keyframe anchor
stroke
point, I'll
options.
keyframe position. And
cool.
now
So
all
all
I
I
want
want
is
is
just
some
we can watch this position
variation
value
in the background, so that
it
we
also
can
changes
see what's
because the
happening.
position of the layer within the screen is governed by where the
and I'll
anchor
make
point
it
is.
a lighter
So
colour.
that means the position needs to update in order for this to look like
Okay.
it's in the same spot. So I've got two new keyframes. What we need to look at is a new thing
Now,
called I can
adjustment
rotate that again. And an adjustment layer is an empty
And
layer.
again, it looks
that
like
is
it
not
works
visible
here
by default at all. But I've
But
still
it
got an
lets
issue
us
here.
apply effects to it.
Because
And all of
even
those
though it now
effects
starts
get
at the right
applied
spot,
to everything
the
sitting
anchor point
underneath
is
the adjustment
smoothly
layer.
transitioning.
So if I
during
apply,
this time.
apply
So I actually
a
wanted
brightness
to
contrast,
hold this position right up until
and
maybe I turn down the brightness here. So
And
I could
contrast.
copy those keyframes.
You can
and
see
put
it's
them
applying
here so
to
that
everything,
the anchor point and the
and I
position
can
stay
scale
the
the
same
adjustment
until here,
layer
and
and
then
move it
suddenly
around,
it changes
and it only applies to
the next
everything
bit.
within
And I
that
could put
area.
this, and it won't
keyframe
apply
later
to
if I wanted to.
anything that's above it. So if I put this racket above the
Just as
adjustment
a raw
layer,
start.
that's not included. But it doesn't matter either side. I'll add another effect as
Now
well.
that
works, but I can improve it. Gaussian blur. If I delete these,
And
I
we
can
can see
select these two
this is a bit more
keyframes. Interesting now, and tell them. And I could also
To
mask
hold
it
or do
And
anything.
that means we're not going to get
as well.
any in-betweening, any transition between those keyframes.
So I
That's
can
gonna
move an
hold
object
that
around
value
and affect everything that's underneath.
until it sees
So with that
another
in mind, I'll
keyframe.
put it.
And then the anchor point and position up
Well,
there.
I'll keep it there, but I'll take off.
So I
these
want all of these to
effects.
hold,
No, actually,
and
I'm
then
gonna
for
keep
the
them
next
'cause they're
roll, I'll move it
helping
again.
us see it.
But let's look
And
for
I
a
got this
distort
yesterday
effect
as
to
well.
distort it like
How
a
did-
magnifying
Did you
glass.
get this issue?
So we're going to distort.
So the third roll,
Bulge would kind of do it.
when you move the anchor
Um,
point, did you get that? That's weird.
Yeah,
I can't
probably.
figure out why it's happening. So,
So we want
I'm
to
gonna
put that
it down
in the
as
middle of the
bug.
layer, and let's check that it
and
moves
save
with
my
the layer.
sanity.
It doesn't.
But essentially,
so we'll
let's
have
just
to
do those
do
two
something
rolls.
about that in a second.
Luckily, the
Um,
point of this exercise
change
is
its
that
size
animating the anchor point
to
like
match
this is
Our circle,
complicated
which I
and is
obviously
not
haven't
always
drawn
going to
properly.
work.
No, it's
So I
okay.
think that bug kind of
and
emphasizes
then
that.
change its
So give that a go.
magnification. Now the problem here.
Okay, so let's move on.
is
I'll
that
just
it's not
show Jeremy's
hiding what's
solution
underneath
here.
it.
So essentially, I was
think
trying to
this
move it with
quite
the
works.
pan behind tool,
Oops.
and that has some sort of bug which is causing it to move the layer. So what he did was he moved the anchor point
Let's try blending
by value, but then that means he has to then move the position back. Which luckily,
Okay, let's
because
turn
we're
off
working on one
magnification and let's
dimension,
try
not two, it's a little more
different one.
accurate than we would expect. But there still might be a jump if you don't place it perfectly. So you can see if we look at this corner. Okay, Sphereize works a little bit
I
better.
haven't quite for our purposes.
Aligned it perfectly, so
So I'll
it
put the center
jumps
of the
position a little
sphere
bit.
there, and I'll increase the radius so it matches.
Okay, so the circle. Let's look at the next one. But it doesn't give us many other
So
options.
animating
we
the
can't
anchor
adjust
point
how
is
magnified
painful,
it is.
and
We
in
could
that
potentially
instance
just
we
add
hadn't done any
another
animation yet,
Sphereize,
and we were
just
animating the
duplicate
anchor
that
point
effect.
while we were animating, which is a
That
bit
as well
easier
doesn't
than if
move
we've already
with the
animated.
mask. In this
So we might need to do
situation,
something like
it's already animated.
check the position. So the position of this
Um,
mask is 732
so
by 392.
animating the anchor point is going to be
The
really
position
difficult.
of
These
and I'll give
Sphereize
you an
effects
example of
are
that in a second.
pretty
So
much
what
the
we
same.
want to do is
Oh,
use
exactly the
nulls
same.
to fake
So
an
we
anchor point.
wanting it to follow that.
But let's first do the
we can open
old
up
method,
the effect.
So this object moves to the left, and then it
Let's
moves to
delete
the
the
right.
second one for now. And say center
And
of
then it moves
sphere
back.
is linked
And
to
if I look at the project
position
name, it says
of the actual
anticipation
layer.
and follow through.
And then let's
So-
just duplicate.
Just like if
Effect.
the character is moving,
Now,
Um,
when we move that around,
before they move, they
so
probably
then it
go
would
like
just be a
this,
matter of
and then they
drawing
go forward.
the edges
That's
of the magnifying
anticipation.
glass around that and
Follow
counting
through is
one to
when
the
I
other.
stop, I might
Does that answer your question?
lean over, or I might have some momentum going forward and then come back.
Um,
So we want to cool. So
do
another
that
one
here.
that's up there
So-
is Ball's physics simulation. So
When
essentially, this
so
object
what's your name?
eases into its
Daniel
motion, so it
was
doesn't
asking
need
about,
anticipation here. You can get away without
do you remember
that,
what
but
video
it
it was?
stops suddenly, so that momentum needs to go somewhere. So what I'd like to do is put the anchor point here and have it topple that way and then bounce back. But that's
Done?
just an example. Don't do that.
Not that one
But
word
the
type.
problem is I've moved the anchor point and look at my motion
Oh,
path.
oh, there it
I've
is.
screwed up my motion path. So if I go back, now the anchor point is in that bottom corner, so it thinks that's where it has to align the object at that point in time. So it's screwed up all of my animation. So I don't want to do that. This section and
Ball's
animating the
bouncing
anchor
around.
point there is
Now
going to
this
become
looks
really
3D,
difficult.
like it's done in a 3D program, or it's done
So instead,
in real life. They've actually built this. Which
wanna use
may
a
well
null.
be how they've done it.
So I'll create a new null.
But we
layer,
could do this
null.
in After Effects. We could easily fake
And just
a lot
watch
of
the
the
screen
soft
for the moment,
shadows
'cause I'll give you
with
a
just
chance to
layers
do it in a sec.
that are attached to.
And I
the
want to
ball layers.
find the
And the
point
balls
at
don't
which
have
I
much
need
texture,
a
so
different
so
anchor
they're-
point,
we could
which
easily
is
fake
right
it
here on
3D.
this keyframe.
And
But
then
essentially,
the
Daniel
null
was
where I
thinking
need an
if
anchor
he had
point.
to animate all these balls, and then
It
what
would
can
take
I
a long
do
time.
to make that object
Follow that anchor.
So, how do we do
Yeah.
that? Well,
the first
so
thing I'm going to say
I will
is
name
it's
this
not
null
that
so I
hard
know
in
what it is
animation
because I might get
if you're
more
comfortable
later.
with
So
animation.
I'll call it.
So
So if you've got maybe 3 or 4 balls, you could quite easily
Anchor.
go in and
animate the balls.
and I will parent
the square.
And it'd just be a matter of
No.
going forward
That
in the
means the
timeline
square
and
can
saying,
still
well,
animate,
where would this bounce after
but when
it
it
hit
gets
this surface?
to this point in
probably
time,
bounce
I
this
can
way.
now
You'd have
tilt
to use
the
the
null
pen tool
and it'll take
correct
some
some
things.
with it.
But remember, it's taking the square
and then we'll
and
go to
all
the
of
next
its animation with it.
bounce. So maybe
So if I go back now, the square
Maybe
animates
here.
up. And if I go forward, the square animates up because I've tilted
I'll give it
everything.
a bounce like that.
So when I tilt
And
it,
then
I'll
the next
send it back to
point, so it's
zero.
coming on this angle, it hits there.
I want to
It'd
start
probably
it
go
at
back
zero,
this way, but I want it to kind of get over here.
tilt it,
So I'm going to send it straight up.
and then make sure I go back perfectly to zero. Otherwise, the rest of the animation is going to be screwed up.
And
And then I'll just ease that, send it down, and I've created that fake anchor point that I can use to tilt that object. And then it hits. So
there.
go ahead and do that, and then see if
And
you
it
can
would
figure out
probably
how to
bounce
do the left side as well.
Off-screen at that point. Or maybe
I'm sorry,
maybe
the right side
there
as well.
again. And then it would bounce.
All right, let's have a look at the solution. Okay, so I've done the first one.
Okay, now
And
if I play
remember I
this,
said I wanted some anti-rotation as
first
well.
and
So
foremost.
before it moves again, I'm going to make sure
so I need to
it
then
rotates again.
adjust it.
So
So,
I'm just going to copy these keyframes.
so I probably want to think, well,
and
I don't want it to go fast
here
here and then slow here,
just
or fast
before
here and
it
then slow
moves.
here. So the first thing I might do is
So
use a new
it takes a
technique
run up,
that I
and
don't
then
think
it
we've
moves
looked at,
again.
which is to select all the keyframes in between, right click and say rove across time. And now all those keyframes
but then when I
move,
get to here,
they're governed by the keyframes
I need it
around
to
them.
rotate around
So it's
this
essentially
corner.
saying
I can't
make
move
all
this
of this
null
the
because
same
it's
speed
this square's
and just
parented
adjust
to it.
where these keyframes
So
need
I'm
to
going to
be
create a new null,
automatically. So I'll expand this out
and I'm going to place it on
and
the
it's
corner.
not quite working there, so I might adjust
Now,
this keyframe.
one thing I want
and
to
turn it
do
back
is
into
just
a normal
clean up my
keyframe.
timeline a little
Give it
bit.
some
I know
easing.
that the first null is only relevant from here.
I might need to lock some of these down
here.
again once I've
So I'm
seen
going
where
to
they
trim
should
it
go.
so that
But
I
we
can see that in the
slowly
timeline.
tweak this
And this
and get it to
new
look
null
more
is
realistic.
only relevant from here.
So it's not that complicated an animation.
So,
But, of course, with
now that I
20
can see
balls,
that a bit
it's
better,
still something you don't want to do.
I'm
and you can
going
get more
to
realistic stuff.
name this null
By using
right
a physics
anchor.
simulation.
So, and I'm going
If I go to AE
parent
scripts,
the square to the right
Com,
anchor and hit
which
R,
is plugins for
and
After
keyframes,
Effects,
and do the same
I
thing.
can find a plugin which
Now I might think that that works, and it does for this section. If I look at this, it works.
Thanks.
But the problem is back here,
I nearly clicked the unsafe
the
link.
first null
Saved
isn't
me.
doing anything anymore. it's not
I can find a
rotating the square
plugin for
because
physics, so I
I've
can just type
changed
in
the
physics
parent of the
and see what
square
we get.
to the
But
right
one
anchor.
called
It's
Newton
no
is
longer
pretty good
the
for this
left
stuff.
anchor.
So Newton's there.
So I need
It's
it to stay
expensive.
the left anchor.
But there are other
so that this has
there
an
are other
effect.
things that do similar.
But when it
stuff,
gets to
but
here,
Newton's pretty good.
I need it to change to the right anchor. So there's two ways
So
to
it
do
lets you
this.
set up your objects, and
The
then
first way
apply the
is
plugin, and it'll just
I can
look at
take
what's a rigid object,
the layer
what's,
at this point in time,
something that should react to the
or this
environment,
point.
and it'll figure it all out for you.
and I can split the square
It doesn't actually do
so that it's a completely different layer.
3D,
and I can parent the second half.
but you'll notice
to
the
right
physics in this is all 2D.
So
and then
the
they've
first one's
then they've
parented to the left
attached
anchor,
those to 3D objects.
and then seamlessly it switches out to
so
the
that's
second
one
one,
way
which
to
is
do it.
parented to the right anchor.
and that's that.
Now that works, but it puts
So,
more
what's another question?
layers in my timeline, which may or may not be the most appropriate answer. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to keep this one object, and I'm going to ask, how can I get the square to follow both of these anchors? So I just split the layer. How can
Page
I
3,
do it
was it?
without splitting the layer? Yeah, so the square follows the left anchor because its parent says left anchor. If I make the left anchor's parent the right anchor, then when the right
54.
anchor moves, it takes with it the left anchor, which then takes with it the square. So it's kind of like parenting, it's kind of like doing a character animation, and the hand follows the forearm, but the hand should also follow the upper arm.
So it's
But I
this
don't parent the
section
hand to
here.
the upper arm, I parent the forearm to the upper arm. So
Now, the left anchor works. And
Okay, so if we go
the right anchor
slowly,
works. And if I extend the left anchor out,
it's
I'll see
not
that it
really
gets dragged up as
morphing
well.
anything. It
But we
happens
can't
quickly,
see
so
that.
you don't
It's
realize,
invisible,
and
so it
that's
doesn't matter.
the case with a lot of things in After Effects. It looks like it's doing one thing, but it's actually doing something else when it's constructed.
So each of these
Okay, so
objects,
we've looked at two methods so far: animating the anchor point.
the wheel is
and
expanding to cover
animating
up the
using
wheel.
nulls. And nulls is a bit more versatile,
And that's a shape layer.
let's look at
object.
a third
So
method.
then those white
number
objects
2, alternative
are
method.
animating their paths.
Now it
to grow
says
longer
it's the same file,
and
but
turning
now it
into
says
this.
do the same
And
thing.
chances
using
are
the
those white
transform
layers
effect.
that were morphing aren't
So,
actually the same layer. That
You might
they're
not know where the
animating
transform
here.
effect is
It's
in the
just
effects menu.
a transition
So
layer
make sure
to
you
make
go
it look
over
like it's turning into the
and
other
look
layer.
in
And
the
that's
effects
the
and
key. You don't
presets
want
palette, and you can just
have
search
to keep the
transform.
same layer the whole time from the truck to the hand and expect to
And
animate
if you
it.
can't see that
You'll
palette,
have-
you can always
you'll
set
change
up
the
the
truck,
views up
you'll
here.
animate that, you'll set up
So
the
if I go
hand, you'll
small
animate
screen,
that.
it hides some of the
And
palettes.
then
If I go standard,
After you've done most of your animation,
hides
you'll
a
go
lot of
back and you'll
palettes.
say, okay, now I'm going to
if I go
create
default, I
10
see
more
a
layers
bunch more.
to make this
So
look like
if I select
it's morphing
the layer
from one to
and
the other.
I double click
And
on
then
that
some of these other
transform
layers
effect,
just kind of
and I also know
appear
where it
over
is
the
now
top.
because it says it's under the distort.
So
menu.
notice that
if I
frame,
go up
that
to
cuff and that texture just appears. It's
Effects.
happening so quickly
distort
that you
it's
don't
in
notice.
here somewhere. There. Okay, so this effect gives us another set of translation.
Let's do a slightly different
tools,
version.
translation properties. So if I open up my layer, I've got transform, which is for the layer in general, which we've seen before. But then I also have an effect called transform that has all those again. So I have this leaf,
So
so
I want to
I'm
morph
going
it
to,
into, let's say, a ball.
move the transform
So I'll do the
effects
ball.
anchor point. And it can be there. And I can do that by either dragging these values, and I'll see that little circle there.
And
Move,
I'm
that's
going
its anchor point,
Look
and
up
that's the layer's
in my
normal anchor
effects
point.
morph and see if
But
there's
it
anything.
also changes the position.
Doesn't look like there
I can
is.
see that's where the
Try
layer
warp.
usually is, but because of this effect, this is where the layer is now.
I'll just type in distort and see what
So,
we have under the distort menu. It's not bringing
I
that up.
also,
I'll just do it up
if
here.
I undo that, I can also
Or
click
down
on this button here and say I want to just click and say where the anchor point should be. So if I click on that, it gives me a crosshair that I can then
So
just simply
saw
click
this
in this
10
corner and
minutes
say
ago.
that's where the anchor
Where's it
point
gone?
should be. But again, it's moved the actual layer. Because it's moving the anchor point, the position is getting, the visuals of the position is getting screwed up. So I want to readjust the position
Reshape.
to put it back. I think that's the
Into
tool
the
we
right
need.
spot.
So
And what I'll find
reshape
is
lets you specify a source mask and a
destination
value that it
mask.
needs to be. Is
So,
actually exactly
believe,
the
and
same
hopefully I'm correct,
as the value of the anchor
we
point. So I can
simply
type that
draw
in
the
directly, the shape of the first object
that
and
we
know
want.
that it's in exactly the same spot as before, but I have an extra anchor point that I can use.
We'll just do it
So
roughly.
now, if I hit R on the layer, rotation goes from the middle because that's a layer. But if I go up here and use rotation in the effect, it goes from the corner. So,
and then
now
I'll draw
all
the
I need
shape
to do
of the
is
second
find
mask
that point where the
I
square
want.
hits,
second shape object
which is
that I
there.
want.
So these are all on the same layer, and layer that I want to warp. And
Keyframe
I'll pick-
rotation.
Let's name those so we can
Move
along.
Do it a bit easier. So
Change the rotation.
oh
move
well,
along,
mask one, mask
change
two,
the
that's fine.
rotation.
So source mask
and
can
I
be
can
mask
hit
one.
you on the layer and see
Destination
that
mask can be
rotation
mask two.
appear there. And you'll notice it's drawn a line. That's how it's going to align the points on this.
So without having any
and
extra
then we
layers,
just, I've got
animate the
a
percentage.
new anchor point.
And it warps.
Now, before you
between
go
those
ahead
two.
with that, I'll show
Now,
you that because
next-
I've drawn this mask
the next
outside of the
rotation
boundary of
point.
this layer, it's getting
And I'll do
cropped.
something
So
a little
really
bit
I
more
should
advanced.
Move that mask. So now I get to this point, and I need
that's
a
all
new
I have to do.
anchor point.
Animate that
The
percentage.
anchor
and it
point for the
warps.
effect hasn't moved with it, just like the null didn't move with it. Okay? So at this point in time, who can tell me how to add another anchor point?
We could move the
Pixel. That's an
easy
one. Depending on what you want the
Yep,
pixels
so
to
I
do,
could,
just like I
well,
did in
number
that
7, who
first
wrote up
task,
pixel
I
art?
could keyframe
do you want to show us
those, what it
We
is.
could just add another
Yeah. So during the first one, I could I could keyframe those to there and hold them, and then I can
the top right corner.
move it again. That one.
Yeah.
And update this 1332 630.
So
And
just
so the
this
anchor
in
point
general?
moves,
Yeah, I guess.
and I can rotate it again, and I'll just copy those rotations because they will probably be the same.
Yeah, no, not really. I mean,
Inverted.
really, to get pixel art
I
looking
move that to the wrong
really
spot,
correct
so
to the
I
way
need
you
to
want it to look, you would draw it
pixel
further,
by pixel.
right? But if you want to fake it, if it's not that important in your scene,
Okay.
then we can fake
And
it
rotate
with an
it
effect as
in the
well.
opposite direction.
So, okay, so I've now done that by a combination
Let's
of
look for
those
pixel,
last two
but
things
we're
that
probably gonna
we
need to
did.
use,
So we've got
mosaic.
anchor point and position
So
on
it
the
doesn't look
effect
like
that suddenly moves.
They're animation presets,
and
not
then
effects. It rotates.
So it doesn't
Now
look like it
that's
has a
perfectly
pixelate
reasonable way to
filter,
do it.
so
It's probably the best way to
we
do
use
it.
mosaic,
But
which is
your
essentially
other
that,
suggestions,
under
which is a
stylized.
good one as well,
we apply
is
that
to
and we say
simply
how
add
many
another transform
Apply this
effect.
to the wrong one.
And
I
on
think.
that second transform effect, I'll collapse the first one. I can set up a
How
whole
many,
different anchor point.
pixels do we want?
Now,
So we could say 50 by 50.
let's take this a step further.
turns
If
it
I
into
moved that anchor point,
another thing you might like to do,
and I'll hit
20.
Y and I'll grab that anchor point. And
Another
move
thing
it
you
over
might
here.
like to do.
It's really
is
annoying
add
that
a
this
posterize
moves,
effect,
right?
So posterize,
But we know
limits the
that
spectrum of
position
whatever
value
you're
to
talking
fix
about.
it needs
so
to be exactly
posterize
the
time,
same as
but in
that.
this case we want
So
posterize in the
why
stylized
don't we
menu.
just automate
and it
that?
posterizes colors.
Let's
so we can
open
say
up
we
that
only
effect
want 3 colors.
and go to
and
position
it turns it into a 3.
and
thing.
using the parent
now
and
that's
link
not-
tool, I can create
Obviously
an
that doesn't
expression
look like a
from
leaf,
that
so-
property to
So really,
follow
if it's
the other
important
property.
to you, you'd probably want to draw.
and it's given me an expression
outline,
which looks like
things
that,
like
but
that.
I don't need to
And we
look
could
at
do
it.
that
I can see
actually
from the
pretty
red values
easily
it's
here
linked
as well.
to
So
the
if
other
I
property, which
just
means
draw
if
an
I move
outline,
the anchor
which is gonna
point
look like a heart,
on the fly, it corrects
Unfortunately.
the position values so that it's
Maybe
just
I'll add
like
another
when I
line.
usually move the anchor point.
Oops.
And then, like before, I can just
And I'll add a stroke to both
animate
of those.
rotation. Okay, so give that a go with the transform effect. And remove the fill. And now I could apply that same effect here. So I'll click on the leaf and I'll grab mosaic and paste it there. And I might need to increase the contrast or something just so that I can get it looking how I want it to look. Okay. Fabric in wind is a bit harder. I'm not going to go through that, but essentially it depends on how you want it to look. So fabric blowing in the wind is primarily a 3D effect, but you could fake it by animating shape layers just by going in, let's say we have that. Going in and animating path. Sorry to interrupt again, but
And saying, okay, well, it's going to
so
kind of ripple
I've
from here to
given
here,
this
so maybe
anticipation as well.
this section now,
And I've changed the
up like
easing
this.
so it's a bit more comical. Once
this
you've
kinda
gotten this
goes
to a point
down
where you,
a
you,
bit
you feel like you
first
understand
before it
that,
flicks up.
there's 3 more tasks. The first one you won't be able to do.
Yep.
I shouldn't have included it, but it says using the anchor point, make this
stuff.
squash. But because it's already animated, it's going to be an
you can't do
absolute
that.
pain.
The type effects are only
Um,
for type.
So you can delete that one. Oops. You can delete
and
that
then
one.
This
But the other
Fix up.
2 are the same, but it's just asking you to do that same technique, but we're going to
and
squash
it's just
it
about
this time.
thinking,
So
well, how would
with
this move? So
this,
in this section
it hits
would
that
go
point in time,
down, so the
and
wind's
then
coming
you
from the
want a fake
and
anchor
this would
point
probably
on that
go
edge
over.
so that you can squash it down.
Some things
and
you
bounce
just
it
do
back
have
from
to
the
do
menu.
manually unless you've got
So once you're happy with that
access
last
to
one,
like an
alternative
amazing
method,
plugin.
then go ahead and try those
Might
two.
curl a bit more.
Go further down. Okay,
Let's
so
see
I'll
how
just
that
do one of the squashing ones on screen. I'll just do
Alright,
the
so
using the transform.
it's going to be
effect because it's a
difficult
much
with
more useful one.
parts, but if
So
it's quick, it may not matter.
square. I want to see where it animates, so
Right,
it gets
so
to
you
here.
could get
And I'll
away
notice
with
it's already
it
got
to a certain
some
extent. That's not finished. That's only
squash
half
and
done.
stretch on it.
But
So it's got
the
scale
other thing
already
you
on
could
it.
do
As it
is
moves,
explore
it stretches
effects
sideways,
again.
and
So
then it
anything
snaps
under
back when it
distort
hits the
might
wall.
help.
That one stretches around the
And
middle,
we do have
around the middle anchor point, because it's
So
in the
if we
middle
put
of
the
the space.
midpoint of
It
the
doesn't have
ripple
anything
here.
to ground it. But when it hits the wall, it's pushing to the left,
Get rid of all this.
so it needs to hold that position on the.
we
on
can
the edge.
increase the radius
So
of the
I'll add the
ripple
transform
and
effect. I'll straight away go in
Width and
and
height.
link that
position
position
only goes to 100, so it's
to
it's
the
gonna be
anchor
difficult
point.
to
So I
quite
don't
get
have to
what
worry
we're
about it
doing.
anymore. And then I
but
know
we
I need to
can
animate it for the right hand side, so I'll
animate
add
the
a
radius
keyframe for both
or
of those
animate the ripples
immediately.
phase
Actually, I don't need a
and kind of
keyframe
make
on
it a little
position
bit
because it's
that way,
going to follow the anchor point anyway. And then I'll keyframe
Okay, I think we'll stop there for now.
scale.
And let's
But I want to uncheck uniform scale because otherwise all I can do is scale it proportionately. So I'll uncheck uniform scale. I'll scale height, and I'll keyframe height and keyframe width. And now everything's set up except I still need to move that anchor point. So I'll grab this crosshair and I'll put it right on this edge. I should have zoomed in before I did that, but let's try again. Okay, so it's not quite there, but it's pretty close. I'll do it again. Just put it right on that point there. Okay. Now, everything's set up. All I need to do is animate the scale and height. So, their keyframe there. I'll hit U so that I can see all my keyframes down here. And then I'll move over a little bit. I'll scale the height up and I'll scale the width down. And then I'll move over a little bit and I'll copy both of those keyframes of 0 over to there. I'm going to ease both of these and I'll see how it looks. Okay, I might push that keyframe one earlier and spread these out and see if I can get it looking as smooth as possible. Okay, that's pretty reasonable. So now on the other side, when it hits this wall, I'll move the anchor point. So I'll click that crosshair again. And I'll go in here. And I won't bother zooming. And the anchor point has that keyframe. I need to hold this anchor point until there, and I'll hold that one as well, just for the hell of it. And then I can actually just use these same keyframes because squash, the direction doesn't matter. It's still squashing in the same way. So I'll copy those and paste them, and it should look just as good as before. And that's it. So the other method was obviously to use the nulls. But I think you can see transform effect is much easier and cleaner. But sometimes nulls will be handy as well.